Hey, welcome back to Worth 1000 Words, the series where I write a 1000 word short story based on a piece of artwork, no outline. And we've made it to episode 12, and today I'm happy to say I had another request, not officially in the comments, but a good friend of mine recommended an artist actually, not a specific piece of artwork. I did choose one of those pieces, and I think you'll know why once we get into it and you check it out. And a nice accompaniment to this, I thought needed to be ambient, something dark, something haunting, and a new album by an artist I listen to a lot named Richard Skelton called Last Glacial Maximum, all one word, but I will put a link in the description if you want to check it out. With that said, let's not waste any more time and let's check out the artwork. Today's artwork is by Peter Polak. He's an illustrator and concept artist out of, now I'm probably going to completely butcher this, even though I did look it up on Google, Luchanec, Slovakia. He's also known as Apteris as well on Instagram, and then that is his ArtStation profile. But anyway, I mean, look at this artwork. What a story to tell. I'm not sure if he's wearing a porcelain mask of some kind, but you can clearly see that he's got ribs exposed right below his neck, so this guy's not doing so great. But at least he has a couple of friends, which happens to be the title of the artwork. The atmosphere here is great, and I think there's a really cool story to tell. I already have some ideas rumbling around in my head. Let's see what this weird-looking guy gets up to. Thanks, Peter. Awesome artwork. Always thank you guys for the inspiration, and let's move on to the writing. So the first thing that I was drawn to was the darkest thing, and I don't mean tonally dark, I mean actually color dark, and that was his eyes. And that gave me an idea where I thought I would play with the five senses. So you'll see that my first line is he had no eyes, but he could see. And that will be repeated. Well, the other senses will be repeated throughout. And I thought that was kind of a cool experiment or device to tell the story, rather than it just being completely linear and standard. It was a kind of a device within the story that helped me carry it forward. So it was almost like a mini outline, but not subject matter anyway, but just the way that this character would perceive. So I'm not sure if you can tell what's going on quite yet, but the idea was to have these rats of his, right? Like almost familiars. If you're not a D&D nerd, what a familiar is kind of like an animal companion that you can have some kind of communication with, let's say. You might be able to see through their eyes or perceive what they perceive. And so that's what I went with, because clearly he's dead or something very close, or undead with his ribs showing. And so here I moved on to the touch. He had no fingertips, but he could feel. And these rats are going through this tunnel, going to get something. And because of their vantage, I wanted to make sure I described everything from their POV. So everything is very massive. It's not quite described as it may be if someone knows what that object would be. So when they're talking about a room of columns, drapery between them, those are essentially bedposts. So I decided that maybe where this character seeks his victims out is some kind of shelter where they keep sick kids. I have no idea. Maybe not, but that's just kind of was running in my head, because there has to be some morality to this character. I didn't want him to make him completely evil, so he seeks out the people who aren't doing so hot. And see, here we go. He had no ears, but he could hear, and I continue to describe the thing, describe the scene through that sense. And oh, sorry, messing with the music. Got to have a soundtrack. And I wanted to, so once again, like I said, size, right? So we have the god of the ghosts, huge song. So this is essentially just a person coming through this area, like a nurse or some kind of caretaker. I don't really know, but it's a person of some kind. And I wanted to establish them as gigantic compared to these rats. And I'm not sure if it's very apparent yet, and I'm really not sure if it's very apparent even toward the end what is really happening. I guess that's up to you guys to know. And here we are again. He had no nose, but he could smell. Switching over to another sense, and It's the smell of death. And I don't know where this came from, but I thought maybe that rats or other animals or other creatures of any kind might have a different perception of what death smells like. So, as you know, if a dog eats its own crap or the crap of other animals or even carcasses, they have a different perception of the world. And so, I thought maybe I would play with that here. So I have it smells like a musty blanket left in a cold room for years, window cracked in, letting the mist in. So there's a little bit of a humidity factor there, and then sour like an apple left in the rays of the sun. Not dry though, moist enough. And then sad. Yes, I don't know why I decided this, but I thought it was kind of cool. It's not really what you may think, but sorrow has a smell, sadness has a smell. Like whatever is clinging, or whatever these people before death are clinging on to before they pass finally. And all I did there is I wanted to break those up into separate paragraphs. So I was going at one, but I thought I always try to break stuff up for emphasis. And you can see a little musty, a little sour, a little sad. So that's some repetition there that I feel like it's almost like musical in its nature, and I love trying to do stuff like that. I love reading stuff like that. Whenever an author does repetition for emphasis, it just really sticks in your head, you know. And that's exactly what you want at that particular time. And here we are, the next sentence. He had no tongue, but he could taste it. But the act hadn't been done yet, so not yet, but soon. The drapery riddled with terror. So we see this rat climbing up the bedsheet of this child or this person, presumably a child, because he's going to be wearing the face of a child as shown in the artwork here. I decided that's what it was, a mask of flesh. Kind of hard to tell, but I figure he's dead. He probably doesn't want to show his skull face. And then here, I know another thing. So I'm about midway, and this is when I usually try to turn the scene. I like to try to either have something happen. There's been really no conflict so far. And so what I thought is this has got to be where the scene turns. If you're familiar with the story grid by Sean Coyne, that's essentially when a scene or a chapter or something uh, changes. It does like a complete 180 or does something unexpected that drives the story forward. So in this case, we have this rat on this bed, and he is slowly climbing up the body of this victim. And even the rat at this point is salivating because, you know, even though it has this mental link with this character, his primal urges, his animalistic urges are manifesting. And you can see I'm pausing. I'm considering, okay, well, how is this going to happen? And he's slowly creeping up here. This mountain range of blanket folds is not too bad, and you know the victim stirs slightly. So he pauses, waits, and then we see the mouth of the victim open. And once again, from the perspective of a rat, so not perspective of a rat, but like also to him, to this character. So and then consume. We wanted to make sure the rat wasn't going to completely eat this victim that needs to take something back, which is the face of this person. And so there's almost like a duality happening here. There's almost like an inner conflict between our character and the rat because he's physically saying he must hold back. It was not for now. And so there's this constant back and forth with our character and the rat. So it's not like a perfect marriage between these two minds. There's something else there, some kind of flaw to it. And here we have the rat jumping. And what I decided to do is kill the rat. I needed some kind of device here to provide a turn, a change, something interesting, some kind of conflict. The more conflict, the better. And right before the rat reaches, there's darkness. And this is kind of the perception of the guy, of the child, through the rat. So there's an infinite darkness, crunching bones, slurping guts, and then we hear a scream, rat. And then we have our character. He's all right with it. Our brother was bound to be lost because, as we see in the picture, there's two rats there. There's not one. So presumably he has many, many rats, endless rats, because the city behind him looks a little dark and dank. And then we have another mind awakening. So here I'm introducing a second rat. But it's only singular, so in the image there are two rats, so I have to figure out how I'm going to get there. And here I'm complementing the sister, so the female rat, she's a little more lithe, more calculated than the brother. The brother maybe was a little bit more anxious. And that just refers to male and female, not any kind of real relation. And what I do is I decide that this this rat is somewhere else. So like we have a lot of these rats kind of coursing into this room to find a victim, and he like literally mentally teleported to another one at a different body. So this isn't the same body. And then here's a bit of that morality I spoke about, a rattle of breath, a mercy this would be. So he's kind of justifying the fact that he's killing this person and taking their face. And yeah, here we are that he's basking in her amazing skill. And then here is the second rat I decided to bring in, because I figured if someone is going to eat the face off of someone, it's going to be a little large for a single rat to carry through, to prevent it from being sullied, as you see. And so they kind of stretch it across like like one of those nets that maybe like you see a fireman carry outside at a window if someone falls out or to jump. That's just kind of what I envisioned. So it's not touching the ground at all. And here I go. I don't know why ghosts came to mind, but I just the image is pretty haunting, and the music I was listening to was pretty haunting. So it kind of drew me there from the rat's perspective. But they are not ghosts, in fact. And here they are making it back out through whatever tunnel they entered in. And I decided that this still wasn't quite enough conflict. There's just one little bit. It was saved. And there's one last thing I needed to do to complete this picture. And you'll find out what that is here. I noticed a detail. Can you spot it before I write it? And here we are. We're seeing himself through their eyes. So he grew through our eyes, meaning in size. And then no, something happened. We have a black shape tearing away from the night, a bladed beak going for the prize they brought him. But this raven swoops down to try to steal this flesh as a meal. But a brother as large as a cat leapt from the shadows, wrestling the bird away. And then once again we have the mental connection there. Oh, he tasted it. He being the boy or the undead child, whatever this may be. And they present the gift. They bring it to him. And it's a perfect fit. And here we go. This is what I'm talking about. Though the raven had taken a bit, a cool night breeze kissed him there. That is the hole on his forehead that we see in the image. At least I'm assuming that's what that is. That's what I took from it anyway. So that completes the picture. We have the rats nuzzling his cheek, squeezing his shoulder. And that is the image you see before you. And I had the lantern light. I think I changed that to lamp light later. But right now I'm just painting that image that you're seeing. And he speaks to them. And I go back and forth a lot on this. You can see that I'm over 1,000 words quite a bit, nearly 100. I believe I go to about 1,100. So there's going to be some cutting there. And I didn't really know what I was going to do with the ending. So I I imagined that there was going to be some kind of bargain struck here, right? So he needs to repay these loyal rats for their good deeds and supplying him a face. And a lot of waffling here, going back and forth. A bit of cheese. I'm like, is that too cliche? Probably, but whatever. It's fine. It's iconic. Let's just say that. So now here I am, 1,106 words. Going back, I got to cut a lot, and I always love this exercise. I almost prefer to go over because it really causes me to scrutinize all these sentences, and I tend to repeat myself for emphasis, as I've mentioned quite a few times. I kind of enjoy that, but I probably do it too much, and that allows me here to spot those areas and clean them up. And there's one more element I wanted to add. So I have his five senses, but there's one thing that I'll clue you in on is that I always refer to him as he. So he remains nameless in this entire piece, and so I think that was the final thing I wanted to add. I wanted to have some significance, to hammer home that who is this person? He remains nameless. It's funny looking at him. I mean, he does have the proportions of a child, but also, like a little person as well with his stature. But I chose child. Almost looks like he has a receding hairline, but I'm guessing that's just the mask over his forehead. And yeah, just removing needless words, as Drunken White says. Getting rid of the extra stuff, fixing some spellings. But this one I had a lot of fun with. I felt like there was a recurring theme throughout, right? So I was playing with the five senses and then writing those descriptions through those senses, and then almost, making this character blind, deaf, everything. They had no senses essentially. So everything that was perceived was through the rats, and so I was able to create something a little bit more abstract, but maybe too abstract. It's hard to know. That's one thing that's difficult to know is, are you confusing your readers? Are you giving them enough information? Or are you giving them too much information? I feel like a lot of authors err on the side of too much information, which it's kind of one thing that a lot of craft books I've read have said. Don't always respect your audience. Always make sure you think they're smarter than, or treat them smarter than you think they are. Respect their intelligence. Like, don't give them enough. Let them think a little bit. And I think it really adds to the narrative, because when you start to point things out literally, it kind of just loses the magic, for me anyway. But there is something to be said for being very clear, right? You also want to write clearly so people know what's going on. It's always a difficult balance, and especially with these short stories, because there's not a lot of words to play with. And I bring it back to consume. I like that because, once again, as this repeating element of the senses, I brought up consume. Like don't eat the face too early, or don't eat the person too early. So I thought finally I would bring it back, and that word was ready now. They were ready for that word, and I decide that he's going to just go to some market, I guess. And here I thought I'd bring the senses back, but you can see that I only have 4 words left, and I'm like, and then I forget a sent, and then I have 2 words left, and trying to delete some adjectives and see if I can get it down, but I'm just going back and forth, and I ended up just completely changing quite a bit here. And here we go. I bring it back to the name. He had no name, but the vendor never asked, meaning he went back. He's going this block journey to some kind of food cart, presumably, and purchasing the food for the rats, the gift he gave them. And we're about to wrap up. I believe I end at 1 hour 16. So, yep, still playing with it. Not quite happy. So the end of going back and forth quite a bit. And here we go. And I said, you know what? Let's bring it back with some more consumed. They consumed 1,000. He had no eyes, but he could see. Darkness, then a splash of light, a tunnel, cobblestones, the cracks between them riverbeds for shit and mud. Blood swirled there too. Man? Animal? Probably both. A grate easy enough to squeeze through. Darkness again, with an amber pinprick in the distance. It grew and grew and grew. Sun-like it was now, blinding. He had no fingertips, but he could feel. Worn smooth wood, cold, then warm, then cold again, wet. It glided beneath him. No give at all to his advances. A room of columns, drapery between them, creating vast half circles he could almost reach, but not quite. The columns were too polished to climb, even for his hands, set with claws. He would find another, he always did. A voice, lilting, a pretty song that haunted this space. It came closer, the god of all ghosts, impossibly huge. Its song became overwhelming. Ears he couldn't cover, but he tried. Burying his head into himself was the best he could do. Finally, the voice passed, receded. He was surprised the drapery between the columns wasn't disturbed. But it was, now that he found the courage to move on. There, not far off now, one of the great half-circles dipped low enough, he believed, to grab. He had no nose, but he could smell. Death. It had a particular smell, hard to quite put a finger on. A little musty, like a blanket left in a cold room, with the window cracked just enough to let the sea mist in. A little sour, like an apple left out in the sun, still moist enough to breathe its aroma into the air. A little sad. Yes, sorrow had a smell. Remembrance of the things that have come to pass, the things that never will. Did you think it all unpleasant? He had no tongue, but he could taste. Not yet, but soon. The drapery, threadbare, was easy to climb, as easy as walking across the floor that his feet had left. Footholds there were, arms reaching to help him up, up, up. Heart beating faster than the rain that always came to wash away his tracks. He ascended the top. He rested. He deserved it. But a thought tickled his mind. Was this too easy? The ground swelled. The sheet he had climbed tangled folds upon folds, mountain ranges he had yet to conquer. It looked farther than it was. He was sure of it. His mouth sprang a leak. Saliva ran like cobblestone rivers, so much he couldn't hold back. He moved on, letting it course out of his mouth, which was now gaping. He slipped across the folds, silken, some even flattening altogether from his weight. A stir. He paused. Not a blink, not a breath, not from him, but from a mouth ahead that parted, slowly, in an inviting passage to explore, new sensations to consume. Consume. That word. He must hold it back. It was not for now. He crested the last hill of sheet, gazing into the maw that had the warmth of a blazing hearth, and he leapt. Claws spread, teeth bared, eyes ready to burst from his skull. The scent of flesh, the scent of that oh so sweet, oh so sour. Darkness. An infinite darkness in a bed of crunching bones and slurping guts. It fell away from him, along with an echoing screech of the ghost he had not realized was back. Rat! It was all right. A brother was bound to be lost, a sister. It was part of the game, the risk. They knew. Another mind awakened, a sister. Eyes, nose, ears, mouth, patted digits. A flood that was almost too much. The screams of the ghost was farther away now, joined by others. No matter, there was time. A sister, more lithe, more calculated than her brother. She had saved this for him, the surprise of her success. This one she found on the brink. A rattle of breath, a mercy this would be. How magnificently she worked, the precision, as clean as he could imagine. And just as life fled this poor shell, she was done. Another sister appeared. This burden was too much for just one. They took it, one on each side, stretching it taut to prevent it from being sullied. There were no signs of the ghost giants. A clean path lay ahead. The candles that had been a sun were now far behind. They headed for a silver light, cut with vertical bars of black. Slip through them they did, with more grace than the brother. Crossing the cobbled road shouldn't be a problem. Not for these two. He could see himself now, through their eyes, just across the way, fingers slipping through the holes in the crate, his cozy home. The sisters bounded. No! A black shape tore itself from the night, a bladed beak going for the prize they brought him. A brother, as large as a cat, leaped from the shadows, wrestling the bird away, biting, tearing. Oh, he tasted it. When the flavor subsided, the two sisters were at his feet, on their hind legs, presenting the gift. He eagerly took it. A perfect fit, though the raven had taken a bit. A cool night breeze kissed him there, with the memory of motherly lips. The sisters crawled up his coat, nuzzled his cheek, squeezed his shoulder. He stepped out into the alley, lamplight bathing him. It was all right. He looked like all the others now, nearly. "It is time," he said the best he could with no tongue and no lips. "You have earned it." Consume. That word was ready now. They were ready for that word. It was only a block to the market where their payment waited, furry with age, ripe with decay. He had no name, but the vendor never asked. His friends, they fed. They consumed. I have a slight confession to make that I'm playing a D&D campaign right now, and I'm playing a character who takes the faces off his victims and wears them, kind of like Leatherface in Chainsaw Massacre. So I was a little partial to this piece. That's kind of what drew me to it. Not that I used anything to do with my character in this, so I don't want you to think that. I just thought it was a funny aside. And this character in this artwork reminded me of my character maybe when he was a kid, even though the events that led him to the face wearing happened in his adult life. I really think the artwork here definitely led me through this. It had a very monotone aspect to it. It was like I said, very ambient. It didn't ebb and flow like a lot of film soundtracks do, and I feel like that sometimes influences me. And it does clash if I'm writing something that may be more quiet or intimate or slow, and then I have this soundtrack where it's just ramping up. But this one worked perfectly. I think I might try to go more toward the ambient stuff as I write. It seems to keep like a nice even keel throughout the whole thing. All right, enough of that. Let's talk about the actual writing itself and what I thought about it and maybe what I learned from it and maybe something you may learn from it. First, I think we can talk about structure. And I'm not talking about structure in terms of inciting incident and climax and resolution and all that stuff. I'm talking about structure within the actual writing itself. And as I mentioned in the voiceover while I was writing, I wanted to play with the five senses here. I imagine this character not having any kind of ears or eyes or a tongue, even as I mentioned. And so he used these rats as proxies for his experiences and how he experienced the world and obviously the face that he had that helped him blend in with the world to a degree, maybe only in darkness as shown in the artwork. But anyway, you'll notice that I did break up at least the first half with those five senses, and I used those as devices to further describe the environment through the lens of those things. And I think one tenet of writing as well is to use all of the senses. And I didn't really think about that as I was doing this, but it's always a good exercise. I think sometimes we can get caught up with only using sight, having the characters only use one sense, and we go towards sight all the time. I mean, that's the first thing I think is as humans that we identify with. It's really like our primary mode of experience. But just remember, we have a lot more than that. And I think in your writing, it's a good opportunity to play with it. I don't want to overdo it. I don't think you should overdo it, but you just need to balance it the best you can. This one was overtly used, but I think it worked because it was part of the story, it was part of the character. And so that device, I think, helped not only the reader understand who this character was and what he was about, but also gave me an opportunity to try to write from the perspective of someone else. And in this case, it was sort of a blend of him and the rats. And I thought it would be a lot of fun to have these rats experience it, or at least there'd be a balance between him and the rat. And so there'd be kind of a weird mixture and maybe some unexpected outcomes. And I think that's what I achieved for myself. I definitely know the scent of death was something that was unexpected to me, and I like the way it turned out because it's ironic. You always want irony in your stuff, where you think death is a horrible smell, but to animals and things, it might not be. And that's what I was playing with there. Now, the one thing that is difficult for me to know, and so if you did make it this far and you do have an opinion on what I wrote, I'd love to hear it. I think that I'm not sure if I conveyed what was happening clear enough for the reader. And because I know exactly what's going on, I'm picturing all this stuff in my head. It's super clear to me, but that is always a huge challenge with me. And I think with other writers is that you just never know when you're giving someone enough or not enough. And as I said in the voiceover, I choose to give them not enough, and hopefully they can connect the dots themselves or at least come to some personal conclusion that may or may not be what I was thinking. And that's okay. I think that the artist's idea of what is happening doesn't necessarily have to fall in line with the person who's consuming it. I know that's a controversial thought. A lot of people say that the art is the art how the artist intended it. Some people say that once you release something out into the world, it's not yours anymore and it's up to interpretation for other people. I mean, just think of when you were in high school and reading books and you hear all these teachers and stuff telling you what Steinbeck was thinking or what Hemingway was thinking, and they don't know. Nobody really knows. It's really their interpretation of what the author did or the artist or musician, whoever it may be. And I think that's why I subscribe to that idea is that everything can be interpreted differently. And sometimes stuff pops out of your subconscious that you don't realize is happening. And then somebody else points it out to you. And in fact, they may know and identify what your true thoughts were at that time. And I think that's one of the coolest things about writing and art in general is that we have the opportunity to have more than one person experience our work and translate our work and interpret it however they may. And it's one of the reasons that keeps me going forward and creating stuff because I really enjoy that experience of it and the effect it may have on others. So I know I went a little long, I got a little rambly, but I hope you got something out of it. I really enjoyed this story. I hope you did too. If you have any thoughts, please comment down below. And as always, I'm always looking for artwork submissions, so don't be afraid to submit. Considering I get very few of them, most likely yours will be the one that I do next. So keep writing, keep reading, read a lot. And thanks for watching as always, and I will see you next week. Thanks. Bye. If you'd like to read this story in its non-video format, check the link in the description. I didn't add anything else. Promise. Thanks again.